Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we're going to be taking a deep dive into some really effective strategies for learning English.
Uh-huh.
Getting away from just endlessly studying, and actually enjoying the process a bit more. And
Yeah.
to help us explore that,
Right.
we're going to be looking at this really fascinating conversation between two very experienced English language tutors,
Okay.
Alexa and Alex.
Got it.
And they break down the differences between something they call hard study
Oh.
and smart study.
Yeah, I think it's a really insightful conversation they have because they make the point that instead of just, kind of burning yourself out with memorizing, tons of vocabulary or grammar rules,
Right.
it's much more effective to be efficient about it.
Exactly.
To really think about, how you as an individual learner are actually learning best.
Yeah.
And that can make the whole process so much more enjoyable and effective.
Yeah. I mean, I can totally relate to that. I remember when I was trying to learn Spanish, I was just, I was doing the classic flashcard thing, trying to cram all these verbs.
Yeah.
And it just felt like, I don't know, like a mental marathon or something.
Right.
And honestly, not much of it really stuck.
Yeah, and you bring up a really good point there that hard study, it's not that it's, coming from a bad place.
Right.
People are trying hard,
Yeah.
but it often leads to burnout and frustration
Mhm.
and just not a lot of progress.
Right.
It's like trying to fill up a bucket that has a hole in the bottom.
Okay. Yeah. That's a great analogy.
So smart study, on the other hand, focuses on understanding, like we were saying, how you learn best.
Okay, so how do we actually do that then? What were some of the recommendations that these tutors had?
Well, they talk a lot about active engagement.
Okay.
And this is a really key idea because you're not going to become fluent by just passively absorbing information.
Right.
You have to actually actively engage with the language.
So what does that look like?
Well, it can look like a lot of different things.
All right.
It can be using apps like Duolingo or Babbel to practice,
Mm.
or writing stories, using new words that you've learned,
Okay.
or having conversations with other learners.
Right.
It's about making the language come alive,
Yeah, I can totally see that.
instead of it just being these abstract concepts on a page.
I've actually started doing that recently. I found this great online community where we do these language exchanges.
Oh, wow.
And even just chatting for 10, 15 minutes each week
Right.
has really helped me feel so much more comfortable just speaking.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
And that actually brings us to another one of their key points,
Okay.
which is the power of short, focused study sessions.
Okay.
Think of it like interval training for your brain.
Oh, I like that.
Instead of trying to cram for hours on end,
Yeah.
try breaking down your study time into more manageable chunks.
Okay.
So maybe like 25 minutes with a 5-minute break in between.
Yeah.
This helps prevent mental fatigue and really keeps your brain, fresh and alert.
It makes so much sense because I've noticed for myself that I get distracted after about half an hour anyway.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, another thing they talked about was technology and how we can use it to our advantage.
Okay.
So, for example, you can set your phone's language to English.
Oh, that's a good idea.
You can listen to podcasts while you're commuting,
Okay.
or even watch movies with English subtitles.
Right.
It's about immersing yourself in the language as much as possible.
Yeah. So it's not about totally overhauling your life. It's about finding these little ways to just weave English into your everyday routine.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And that actually leads us to another crucial point,
Okay.
which is personalizing your learning experience.
Mm-hmm.
There's no one-size-fits-all approach when it comes to smart study.
Right.
So you need to figure out what works best for you.
Okay.
Are you a visual learner?
Mm.
Maybe you learn best through videos and flashcards.
Okay.
Are you more auditory?
Uh-huh.
Maybe podcasts and music are more your thing.
Got it.
It's all about experimenting and finding what resonates with you.
Yeah. I love that. It's like becoming a language detective,
Exactly.
figuring out your ideal learning style.
Yeah, and I think that ties into another important point that they brought up,
Okay.
which is setting realistic goals.
Yeah.
So you don't have to, learn 50 new words every single day.
Right.
What if you focused on truly mastering 5 new words,
Yeah.
using them in sentences,
Okay.
building from there?
So it's about quality over quantity.
Absolutely.
Got it. So what else did Alexa and Alex suggest?
Well, one thing that really stuck with me was their advice on applying your knowledge immediately.
Okay.
So don't just let those new words or grammar rules that you've learned just sit in your notebook.
Right.
You need to use them.
Use them. Okay.
Write a journal entry in English.
Okay.
Have a conversation, even if it's just with yourself.
Mm.
Think to yourself in English throughout the day.
Right.
The more you use it, the more natural it'll become.
Yeah, it's like taking your English skills out for a test drive.
Exactly.
Yeah, you got to get out there and practice.
And that leads us to another really important element that they discussed,
Yeah.
which is the importance of embracing a positive mindset.
Okay.
Mistakes are going to happen, you know?
Right.
It's inevitable. But instead of seeing them as failures,
Right.
view them as learning opportunities.
Oh, I needed to hear that. Because
Yeah.
I get really discouraged when I make mistakes, you know?
It's understandable, but it really is all part of the process.
Okay.
You know, even the most fluent English speakers make mistakes sometimes.
Right.
It's about learning from them and moving forward.
Yeah.
And you know, it's also important to remember that learning any language takes time and dedication.
Right.
It's a journey.
So we've talked about active engagement and, having these really focused study sessions and embracing technology and personalizing our approach and setting realistic goals.
Yeah.
And actually using what we're learning.
Right.
What else should we keep in mind?
Well, they had some great tips on staying motivated.
Okay. This is important because I know I struggle with that sometimes.
Yeah, it's something we all struggle with. And one of the things that they emphasized was remembering your why.
My why. Oh.
Yeah. Your personal reason for learning English.
Okay.
Is it to travel?
Mhm.
Is it to connect with people from different cultures?
Right.
Is it to advance your career?
Okay.
Whatever it is, keep that vision in mind.
Oh, that's a good point. Because sometimes I get so bogged down,
Mhm.
in the grammar rules and everything that I forget why I wanted to learn English in the first place.
Yeah. We all do that sometimes.
Yeah.
But if you can just take a step back and remember that initial spark, it can really help fuel your passion.
Oh, yeah.
And don't forget to celebrate those small victories along the way.
Oh, yeah. I love that. Because sometimes those little wins can feel huge.
Right.
Yeah.
Like even just understanding a native speaker
Yeah.
in a conversation can be such a confidence boost.
Right.
So acknowledge your progress. Give yourself credit for all the hard work you're putting in.
Okay.
And here's a thought. What if you tried thinking of English learning as a fun hobby instead of a chore?
Oh, I love that. I remember when I started learning French, I was so focused on being fluent, that I forgot to enjoy the process.
Right.
And it wasn't until I started, exploring French literature and music and film that I really fell in love with the language.
That's the key. You have to find those sparks of joy, those things that make you excited to keep learning and keep exploring.
Right.
So, listen to English podcasts while you're cooking.
Okay.
Watch movies with English subtitles. Join an online community.
Yeah.
Find those little ways to make it a natural and enjoyable part of your life.
Yeah. And not something that I have to force myself to do.
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, this has been a fantastic start to our deep dive.
Into smart study.
Absolutely. Welcome back. We're going to keep talking about some more of these really effective smart study strategies.
Okay, I'm ready.
And one that I found really interesting is this idea of using what you already know as a foundation for learning new things.
So you're saying, like, instead of starting from scratch every time you learn something new.
Exactly. You're building on existing knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And they had this tip about connecting new English words with ones you're already familiar with.
Okay, so, like, how would that work?
So let's say you know the word happy, right?
Yeah.
Well, learning happiness then becomes much easier.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Or if you know the word help, you can easily connect that with helpful.
Right. Yeah, and actually I've noticed that sometimes when I learn a new word, it'll kind of like remind me of a word that I learned maybe a week or two ago.
Yeah.
And that helps me remember the new word better.
You're already doing it.
Oh, cool.
And that's exactly what we're talking about.
And kind of building on that, they suggest grouping vocabulary together by topic.
Okay.
So if you're learning words related to food, learn them all together as a set.
Right.
Or do the same for weather or travel or anything that interests you.
So it's like creating these mental categories almost.
Exactly.
That's really interesting because it reminds me of how I used to make mind maps when I was studying history in school.
Yeah.
And grouping similar events together helps me remember them so much better.
Right.
It's so much easier to learn when you see how things connect.
That's such a great point. And it really highlights how important organization is for learning in general.
Yeah.
And when it comes to phrases, don't just learn them in isolation.
What do you mean?
So let's say you learn the phrase, how are you?
Okay, yeah.
Well, also practice saying variations of that, like, how have you been? Or how's it going?
Right.
That way you're not just memorizing a bunch of separate phrases. You're understanding how they work together.
And how to kind of use them in different situations?
Exactly.
Okay, I like that.
And you know, if you get stuck on something,
Okay.
like a tricky grammar rule or a word that you just can't remember,
Yeah, that happens.
don't be afraid to ask for help.
Yeah. This is something I need to get better at doing because I'm definitely guilty of just kind of like skipping over things that I don't really understand.
Yeah,
But you're right. It's much better to figure it out.
absolutely.
So who should we ask? Like our teacher or?
Well, teachers are definitely a great resource, but you can also ask friends or classmates.
Okay.
You know, you could even look for answers online.
Right. There's a lot of resources out there.
Exactly. And the important thing is to be curious, you know? Don't just accept things at face value.
So be more like a kid.
Yeah, like a kid who's always asking why.
Right. Right.
That's how you develop a deep understanding.
Okay, so be curious, ask a lot of questions.
Exactly. Curiosity is key.
Got it. And speaking of curiosity, I wanted to circle back to something you mentioned earlier about those online communities for English learners. Because I actually joined one recently.
Oh, wow. That's fantastic.
Yeah, and it's a language exchange community. So I have a partner, and we chat for like 30 minutes each week.
Okay.
And we switch back and forth between English and my native language.
That's a really valuable way to get real-life conversation practice.
It is. It can be a little bit nerve-wracking,
Yeah.
at first, but it's also so much fun, and I learn so much.
And you're getting exposure to natural pronunciation.
Yes.
And idioms and all those little things that you wouldn't necessarily learn from a textbook.
Exactly. It's like, learning to swim by actually getting in the pool.
Right.
Instead of just reading about it in a book.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
And speaking of getting in the pool and practicing, one thing that's really important is to make sure that you're regularly assessing your progress.
Oh, okay. So, like, what does that look like?
Well, it can involve a lot of different things. You can use flashcards or make your own quizzes.
Okay.
Or even just ask a friend to test you on some material.
Right.
The point is to actively identify your strengths and weaknesses.
Okay. So it's like taking your English skills for a checkup.
Exactly.
Okay. I like that.
Because it's easy to assume that you're making progress.
Yeah.
But you really need to test yourself.
Right. To make sure.
And speaking of making sure.
Yeah.
When you learn new words, don't just memorize the definition.
Okay.
Try making sentences with them right away.
So, like, use them in context.
Exactly. That way you'll understand how they're actually used.
Okay.
And they'll be much more likely to stick in your memory.
Because I know for myself, sometimes I'll look up a word in the dictionary. I'll understand the definition, but then when I try to actually use it in a sentence, I'm like, wait, how does this work again?
Yeah, it's a common problem.
Yeah.
But by making those sentences right away, you're reinforcing that learning.
Okay, that's a great tip.
And here's another idea for making learning more fun.
Okay.
Use your interests to your advantage.
Ooh, okay. Tell me more about that.
Well, it's like when my mom used to sneak vegetables into my smoothies.
Oh, yeah.
I was still getting all the nutrients.
Right.
But it tasted much better.
I like that analogy.
So if you love music, listen to English songs. If you're passionate about movies, watch them in English with subtitles.
Okay.
If you enjoy reading, dive into English books and articles.
I've actually been watching my favorite TV show with English subtitles.
Oh, wow.
And it's really helped me pick up new vocabulary and phrases.
You're already doing it.
Yeah, without even realizing it.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
And as you're exploring those interests, remember we talked about earlier?
Okay.
Quality over quantity.
Right.
It's better to focus on really understanding a few key things at a time.
Yeah.
Than trying to learn everything all at once.
Right.
It's like building a house. You need a strong foundation before you can add the walls and the roof.
I'm sensing a theme here. It's all about taking things slowly and building that solid foundation.
Absolutely. And don't forget about reviewing what you've learned.
Oh, this is another thing I need to work on because I'll learn something new, and then a week later it's gone.
Yeah, it happens to all of us.
Okay, so how can we prevent that?
Well, you can use flashcards or spaced repetition techniques.
Okay.
Or even just look back at your notes from time to time.
Right.
Think of it like creating a scrapbook of your language journey.
Ooh, a language scrapbook. That's a great idea.
And you can look back and see how far you've come.
Yeah, I'm a very visual person, so I really like that. I'm going to start doing that.
It's a great way to stay motivated.
And remember all those amazing things that I've learned along the way.
Exactly.
Okay, awesome. This is great stuff.
So remember, learning a language is a journey.
Okay.
It's not a destination. There are going to be moments of frustration.
Right.
You might feel like giving up sometimes.
Yeah.
But it's important to remember your why.
Okay, my why.
And to celebrate those victories, no matter how small.
Okay.
And to enjoy the process.
Because it is a process.
It is.
Yeah, I know. I get really impatient sometimes.
Yeah, I think we all do.
And I just want to be fluent already.
I know.
But it takes time.
It does.
And it's about enjoying that journey.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So just be patient with yourself.
Yeah.
Have fun and keep exploring.
This is fantastic. Thank you.
It's been my pleasure.
All right, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive
Uh-huh.
into smart study. And we've covered a ton of ground.
Yeah, we have.
But let's be real for a second.
Right.
Learning a new language, even when you're trying to do it the smart way,
Yeah.
it can still be pretty challenging.
Oh, absolutely.
There are going to be times, when we hit a wall
Uh-huh.
or maybe we feel like we're not making as much progress as we want to.
Right.
So how do we deal with those moments,
Mm-hmm.
when it gets tough?
Well, that's totally normal.
Okay, good.
It happens to everyone. It's part of the process.
Yeah.
But what I really appreciated about this conversation with
Right.
Alex and Alex was their advice on dealing with these setbacks
Oh.
and how to stay motivated.
Yeah.
They really emphasize that these challenges that we face,
Mm-hmm.
they're not failures.
Okay.
They're opportunities to learn and grow.
I like that.
Right.
Yeah, it's about changing your perspective.
Exactly.
Yeah, because I tend to get really discouraged when I make mistakes,
It's understandable.
Yeah.
But it's so important to remember that it's not about being perfect.
Okay.
It's about progress.
Yeah.
It's about learning from those mistakes and keep moving forward.
Okay.
And think about it, even native English speakers make mistakes.
Right. They do, yeah.
It happens to everyone.
Okay, so it's normal. It's okay.
Exactly.
All right, so mistakes, we can handle those.
Yeah.
But what about motivation? Because
Mhm.
sometimes I just hit a plateau. Right.
And I just feel like I'm not progressing.
Yeah.
How do you stay motivated when that happens?
Well, that's a great question, and it's something that they addressed directly.
Okay, good.
And one of their biggest tips was to focus on setting small, achievable goals
Okay.
and to celebrate those little victories along the way.
Yeah.
You don't have to become fluent overnight.
Right.
Instead, focus on maybe mastering a few new words each day,
Okay.
or having a short conversation in English,
Mm-hmm.
or finally understanding that grammar rule that's been tripping you up.
So it's like giving yourself those little rewards, for those small wins.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because it is easy to get caught up in like the big picture goal.
Right.
And then you forget to acknowledge like all those smaller steps you're taking.
Exactly. And those small wins can really add up.
Yeah, they do.
And another tip that they had was to regularly review your progress
Okay.
and to reflect on how far you've come. Okay, because I'm a very visual person, so I was thinking maybe I could create a timeline or something.
Oh, that's a great idea.
To track my progress.
Yeah, a visual representation can be really helpful.
Yeah.
Or you could listen back to old recordings of yourself speaking English.
Oh, okay.
Or look at some of your early writing assignments,
Yeah.
and you'll be amazed at how much you've improved.
Yeah, because it is easy to get kind of, bogged down in the day-to-day
Yeah.
and then forget, oh, wow, I've actually come a long way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And speaking of remembering how far you've come,
Mm-hmm.
another important thing is to remember your why.
My why. Right. Yeah, we talked about
That initial spark,
Right.
that reason you started learning English in the first place.
Yeah.
So is it to travel the world?
Okay.
Is it to connect with people from other cultures?
Right.
Is it to advance your career?
Okay.
Whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
keep that vision in mind,
Yeah.
especially when you're feeling discouraged.
It's like your North Star, guiding you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And here's something else that I found really helpful that they suggested.
Okay.
Try thinking of English learning as a fun hobby,
Oh, yeah.
not a chore.
Yeah, because when I think of it as something I have to do,
No.
it just feels overwhelming.
Yeah.
But when I think of it as something that I enjoy doing,
Mm-hmm.
it's so much easier to stay motivated.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, it's about finding those ways to make the learning process fun
Yeah.
and engaging.
Right.
So, think about your interests.
Okay.
If you love music, listen to English songs.
Uh-huh.
Passionate about movies, watch them with subtitles.
Okay.
Enjoy reading.
Mm-hmm.
Dive into some English books or articles. It's like sneaking vegetables into your favorite smoothie.
I love that analogy.
You're still getting the nutrients,
Yeah.
but it's much more enjoyable.
Right.
So find what works for you. Experiment with different study routines until you find something that you really enjoy.
Yeah, that fits my life, you know?
Exactly. There's no right or wrong way to do it.
Okay, so it's about personalizing it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and just remembering to be kind to yourself.
Yeah, that's so important because learning a new language, it's a journey.
Okay.
It's not a race.
Right.
There will be ups and downs.
Yeah.
But the important thing is to just keep moving forward one step at a time.
This has been so helpful. I really appreciate all this advice.
It's been my pleasure.
So as we kind of wrap things up here,
Okay.
what would you say is like the key takeaway from all of this that you hope our listeners will remember?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway for me is that smart study. It's about so much more than just memorizing vocabulary and grammar rules.
Right.
It's about really understanding how you learn best.
Yeah.
And finding ways to make the process enjoyable.
Right.
And embracing those challenges and celebrating those little victories along the way.
I think that's a great way to put it. It's about having that positive mindset and that curiosity.
Absolutely.
And just that willingness to try new things and figure out what works for me.
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive.
It's been my pleasure.
I hope our listeners feel inspired and ready to take on their English learning journey.
Absolutely.
You know, with all these new strategies.
Yeah.
So to everyone listening, happy learning.
Happy learning.
And until next time, keep diving deep.
Bye.